think, and we would agree that these organizations are really lucky to have each of you, or each of your perspectives and what you're bringing to that, so thank you. One of the things that we often try to talk about at our meetings is the difference between community service and service learning, where community service is going out and helping, but there's all different kinds of service. There's helpful service, and there's compassionate service, but there's also disruptive service. And that's something that I think a lot of service learning educators have in common, and that is that we want to disrupt cycles, and we want to not have it just be simply something that you're doing to be helpful, but that it's informed help. And that and so one of the questions that we were hoping to ask you is, in your work, what kinds of myths and biases do we have as a community that we might be able to address so that we can be more informed, properly informed about how to help?
Kind of myths and bias. There's always, and kind of Millie touched on this in her story, there's always this sense of you are experiencing poverty, or you are poor, you're experiencing homelessness because it was your choice. You made bad decisions. And I think that's the myth and stereotype. I won't say that there's not choice. And I think the choice is not about bad choices, good choices. The choice are hard decisions and harder decisions, right? And some of those decisions are, we are on the brink of losing our home, we're on the brink of homelessness. Do I use the money that we have, the very little money that we have, to either pay rent or buy food? Hard decision is, do I feed my kids or live in an RV so they could go to that good school, and so their life is not changed? Those are the hard decisions I think that we need to elevate more, because people are making those choices every day. Do I take care of my sick mother and go through this emergency and crisis, even though that will impact me financially or impact my support network, or I kind of drop off the face of the world because I'm taking care of my mom for the next year? Those are choices that we make. And I'm even going through that of, do I work longer hours, but I love my family and I want to be home, but I also need to provide for them? What choices do I make? So I think that's one, and I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think we're all going to say very similar things in regards to this. When I was looking at the question, working running a food pantry, Friends Indeed, which I'm part of, has other programs as well. We have a day shelter for homeless women that are at risk of being homeless. We have a bad weather shelter during the winter months. We're moving into more homeless prevention, helping people stay in their homes before they get kicked out, evicted. The next thing is hiring street outreach people that can go out to our homeless community in Pasadena, where we are, and begin to build trust and relationships and try and get those folks to come use the women's room, come get food. Housing is an issue that I think is bigger than we can imagine in trying to deal with that. And that's not even an area I focus in, just seeing it from a little bit when people say, do you know where I can go spend the night? And a lot of times I don't have an answer. When winter is over in Southern California, most of the shelters close up shop. And so there aren't answers for that. But to get back to the question, and it is about how people perceive people that are poor or needing food. We've always been able to demonize the poor. It's easy to do. And I think, and this is my own personal take on this, I think it's because we can relate to maybe not having a lot of money, and so if somebody has even less, they must have done something wrong. We don't demonize extreme wealth or taking advantage of breaks or and without going into like ideas of corporate welfare, but just that, because I think we can't understand how much money is involved there. But somebody doing food stamp fraud, which is so minimal, but yet we hear it on the TV, or that people should just get a job, or things. I think we can, maybe it's because we're not that far away from that happening to us ourselves, and we can grab a hold of that. So I think the biggest miss continue to be around that the people that find themselves needing assistance, whether they're homeless, whether they're not, is that they're lazy and they did something wrong. And we have to change that. And we can change, we can have that conversation here, it's real easy. But expanding that beyond, especially to our elected officials, becomes a really hard thing to do. And I'm not saying don't give up hope. I don't want to end on a downer part on that, but it is something that we're going to have to rise up and continue to fight for.
So a couple of the things that I got from talking to the volunteers and a couple of the staff, and then my own ideas, was that a lot of people that help us with donations or money think that the low income are homeless only. And of course, our homeless population it's really tough for them. You heard it from her. You don't need to hear it from me, but we have seen families, entire families, living in their vans because they either can afford the rent, so therefore they need to make sure that they have, they save that money so that they can provide better clothing so that their kids don't get lonely, and so that they can pay the gas and be able to transport them to school and the older kids to work, or the parents. We also seen a lot of families that are paycheck to paycheck and wondering if somebody gets sick, they don't qualify for a lot, and if they do qualify, they can afford it because it's so expensive, the medical care. So a lot of people end up in the streets because somebody in the family got sick, they had to go to an emergency room, and who has savings? So over $1,000. Just waiting there in case something happens, or their car breaks down and it's $500 or more. And so if they repair the car because they need to get to work or transport the children, then they don't have money and they might end up in the streets. So it's as simple as that. So any of us in this room, if we don't have enough savings, it can happen to any of us. So a lot of our families, we've seen families that have been past donors, past volunteers, and become homeless and become our recipients. It's better to see it the other way, huh? But a lot of the times it happens like that. Another perception that people have is that they don't have education. That's why they end up in the streets. No, we've seen, at one point, we saw a lawyer that lost his job. The wife divorced him. She got everything, and he ended up in the street. And he had a lot of education, and he couldn't help himself. So it's also, if you don't have a right mind, you don't know which direction to go. And a lot of doors close because you close them sometimes yourself. You don't have the information to get the services that you need because they're not really accessible. At MEND, we provide food, clothing. We have medical, dental, vision services. So we're able to serve a little bit more. Ed and Carolyn Rose are the co-founders of MEND, and since I started working there, they told me that the only way out of poverty to them was education. So we had an education and training center, but recently we had to close it. Why? We do not have money to support that area. It's not that we don't think it's important. We need to think, either we keep the education and training center, or do we feed our low-income families? So as an organization, we're suffering. And so we also had to make really tough decisions. either to keep one thing or the other. And the families that are barely living paycheck by paycheck have to make those tough decisions, like you mentioned, just like men did.
Thank you. I agree with everything, and my preparation work was a little misinformed. I came prepared with strategies and ideas for educators working with kids in poverty and kids in low-income situations. And I wonder, because I know that there's somebody from Pilgrim and somebody from that school in Pasadena, can't remember the name of it. Do any of you work with a mixed group of kids, like kids that are fortunate enough to go to a grade school like this and then have children come in of low income?
Well, I think most private schools do have.
Most private schools do have that, right? That's what
Private school has an average of 25%.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's exactly what I was thinking, because one of the things that perhaps I would like to add is the idea of integration and trauma-informed coaching for staff, and then to further getting this idea. My husband told me a story about a kid who was falling asleep every day in his classroom. He teaches high school English, and he was frustrated that the kid was falling asleep, and he was like, "What's going on with you?" And the kid worked at night and then made a tough choice not to spend the money on a bus or Uber to get to school, and would walk from Koreatown to East Los Angeles to get to school in the morning. And we were talking about dental care and how simple oral hygiene improves the chance. This USC professor said it this week, the dean of the USC dental school, that if you have good oral hygiene as a kid, your chance to graduate college has been documented. And so if we can find ways that our students and our communities can provide these organizations with packages and whatnot, because I think if I had to choose between a can of tuna for food or dental floss, I would always choose the can of tuna, right? And so perhaps by dispelling the myth of it's just bad choices, or it's just, but what actions can we come up with that really can impact the future? Like my thought immediately getting a book when we got here was to give it to somebody who needs a book. And this is what we're always looking for, ways to educate, simple ways that we can create opportunities for people to get involved. Hook up and get involved. What can they do? Tangible things.
So I think two things to pause and just reflect on for a moment here is going back to wearing our educator hats and then putting ourselves in the place of students and kind of thinking about those two aspects. Before our final question is going to be, how do you see young people responding to the immediate need and the systematic challenges of poverty? But I think before allowing you to speak on that, I think sometimes it's nice to just kind of see where our heads are at ourselves. And so I wanted to just give everybody a moment or two to dialogue and say, okay, now that I've heard about myths and biases, now that I've heard about what's happening in these organizations, to just take a moment for yourselves and think about it. And then a second question to just to reflect on amongst yourselves before we move on to their answers to the last question is, what sort of skills are valuable in listening to a panel if you're a student. Because one of the things that I'm noticing as I'm sitting here is just, oh, that brings up the issue of fact and opinion. And when panelists are speaking, sometimes they're sharing an opinion and sometimes they're sharing facts. So that just came to my mind as one example, but also maybe to just chat amongst yourselves and think about what's one or two academic skills that I could utilize from doing an activity like this in my classroom or in my school. So we'll do that, and then we'll give you all a chance to respond to the final question. A few minutes to chat.